Good morning, everybody, dear brothers and sisters in Christ. We have Michael Puhaindran, who's going to share his life journey this morning. Michael is the global head of retail banking compliance at Standard Chartered Bank, and I will leave him to introduce himself and also inspire you with his moving story.
Hi, everybody. First of all, a very happy New Year to everyone, and I hope you had a wonderful celebration with your families. And thank you for joining us on this very cold and wet day when I'm sure many of you would rather be curled up in bed with a good book instead. I guess this, talking about this particular episode and and the struggles that happened after that was something that in some ways I actually had for a long time wanted to share and talk about, but always felt unprepared because, in a way, the journey still continues for me. And, but when Bing Seng asked me about it, I thought that, look, it's probably about time that I did try to at least make an effort to talk about it. So apologies if, to some extent, my sharing is maybe to some extent at the end of the day be incomplete. But I certainly do hope that, to at least the extent that it may also speak to many of you. I guess the other thing about this is that obviously everybody's grief is very personal. Everybody feels it in a different way. Everybody deals with it in a different way as well. So obviously, I guess this is just my journey, and I'm hoping that there might be some things that might speak to you, some things that might resonate to you. But obviously, again, everybody's grief is different. So I guess take the sharing for what it is in a way. I also, I guess, wondered as to why, is it even meaningful to share a personal grief story to some extent. It's quite strange and maybe coincidental that, just last week, during the course of the week, as I was preparing for this talk, I came across, a YouTube video, actually one which somebody which I tend to follow quite often, Stephen Colbert. I'm sure many of you watch him as well. But many of you who may know him might know that he has a very personal grief story as well. And interestingly, this was the interview that he had with Joe Biden. So both of whom I guess you might say are very prominent lay Catholics in our time, right? Both of Biden is Catholic, so is Stephen. And they spoke about their grief and, the grief of many of the American people who, faced the loss of a loved one in this season. And they said that, why did they share about their grief? And they have shared about it on, mainstream media. They've talked about it, quite openly. Joe Biden's even written a book. And I guess their message or their thinking was, look, by sharing, right, it is meant to share a message of hope and to let those people who, especially in a period of intense grief, know that they can make it, right? So I guess it is in that spirit and in that light that I try to do this as well. And many of you right now, I'm not hopefully, but, it may not be something that, at this point in time you're going through, but maybe one day if, we all have to go through grief. We've gone through it. We will go through it again, as will I, as well. And that's the one thing in a way that binds us all. So, maybe it's something that, might again, be something that you can recall, in the future. So, and one of the, so again, it's in the spirit of, I guess, just trying to perhaps answer the question of somebody who was really in the depths to, and might help to answer the question about whether or not you can make it, right? And then there's also the spiritual aspect of it, right? So there's the grief aspect in a way, but also, the spiritual aspect. And for me, the grief was, and maybe my faith is not strong enough, but I guess, the grief was so strong that, my faith was completely shattered at the point in time when I experienced this. And, it was just something which was so intense and so vicious that, you know, just completely wiped out my faith at this point in time. And I guess a little bit, this is also about how, to some extent, this, you know, became restored or began to get restored. And that was just the thing about the grief at that point in time as well. I think it struck me almost like a double whammy. It wasn't just that I had lost my wife, which was bad enough, but I kind of felt that I had lost my faith as well, which was, you know, something so powerful to me. So with that preamble, apologies for the slightly long one. Let me introduce myself first. All right, I did wanted to just explain, I guess, the basis for which I was trying to share this morning. I was baptized at birth, right? I've been a parishioner for Holy Family at Holy Family all my life, right? I still live in the East, and I think many of you who would live in the East would know once you're in the East, you never leave it. I have been, I was, you know, in university days, a reasonably active participant in NUS Catholic activities, you know, organized, you know, attended the Catholic orientation camp every year, organized all the, you know, Catholic activities in the law faculty that I was in, you know, and probably that was a, you know, pretty strong period of life, of my faith life as well. When I came out to work, where I was in private practice for a few years, from about 96 to 2003, did all kinds of well, different aspects of legal work. Actually started off in litigation, ended off with mergers and acquisitions in Helen and Glad Hill. And about 2003, 2004, decided that, you know, I did want to find out what in-house life was about. So I moved into a job in-house, where I initially at OCBC for a very short time, and then I joined GE, General Electric. It was around 2004. I remember thinking, oh, you know, I remember receiving some news about the, you know, catechist recruitment. I was thinking, nah, just, you know, too busy in my life, not enough things to do. Next, you know, rather be playing football. Next moment, I get a really bad injury, and then somehow other, you know, it frees up all the time in my life, since all I could do was hobble around. So, you know, became a confirmation catechist for the next 3 years. And again, you know, wonderful period of my life, you know, and it was during this period of time as well that I actually met Hui Yan. And well, you know, not in a bad way, but I suppose the confirmation batch graduated in 2000 and end of 2007. You know, leaving me, you know, 2007 to prepare for my wedding, and it was actually in June 2007 that I got married to Hui Yan. Yeah, and I guess I will just ask Errol, you can just show that first picture first. Yeah, so we had it was a Catholic wedding, but in Bali, and it was, you know, a beautiful ceremony on the beach. You know, Bing Sing, I think, attended, and you know, it was a lovely time, and you know, in a way, it's a lovely beginning, you know, for things, and obviously, very much looking forward for a wonderful life together as well. Interesting aside, you know, Bali actually allows outdoor Catholic weddings, because that's traditionally the way that weddings would have been held in Bali. So, you know, outdoor weddings are permitted in Bali. So, like obviously many young couples, right? Although I was quite a few years older than Hui Yan, but I think newlyweds, I would say. You know, we went through our shares of adjusting to each other, etc. But I would say that, you know, when it came to around the time, which was basically November of 2008, you know, we had been through a little bit together. We had spoken a lot together, and you know, at that point in time, I think it was the feelings that we had were very, very much still of very young love, very much in love. You know, strong emotional sense. And I was actually going through a short break in my career at that point in time. So I had been GE until well, I was still at GE until 2008. At that point in time, I left to join a different division in GE, which involved some work in Hong Kong. And I had been there with doing private equity, GE equity for about 6 or 7 months. And then an ex-colleague from General Electric basically had moved over to Standard Chartered, and he had asked me to move over and join them as well. So it was actually during this period of a short break of about 2 months or 3 months or so that we had perhaps grown closer together. We had done a bit of traveling together, and it was just shortly after a trip to Melbourne that she was due to make this trip to India for work. And I remember distinctly thinking, oh, I really wish you wouldn't need to go, because it was, we were having such a nice time in Melbourne, and, just I'm going to start work literally, but in 5 days time or thereabouts, which was, so the dates, this date was the 27th of November or 26th of November when she left. And I was looking at starting work on the 1st of December, thereabouts. So, well, I mean, but obviously, at the same time, quite proud of her that she had to go as well, because she was then a young lawyer, and it was actually a very good, I think recognition by a company to actually send her to give this talk in India as well. So reluctantly, but yet, quite proudly, obviously saw her off at the airport and let her go as well. Now, I'm going to talk briefly about, so, I guess what happened then, so that I guess, so you will have probably a better idea about what happened at that point in time, and to some extent, why it was so shattering and challenging. Many of y'all would have read it in the news, but I'm sure none of y'all can remember it anyway. So many years ago. Unfortunately, I replay it quite often in my mind, but that's the way it is. So she had left for Mumbai. It was literally supposed to be for an overnight trip, right? She left early in the morning. I remember still clearly going to Terminal 2 at Changi Airport to see her off at about 7 o'clock in the morning. She was actually due to travel there, give the talk, stay one night, and then fly back the very next morning. Not wanting to stay any longer than she had to, I suppose. I saw her off at the airport early in that morning, and I just went about my day. Again, I wasn't working yet at the point in time, so took the opportunity to catch up with friends, do my own thing. And I actually went out for dinner with a friend that evening, getting back home at about 10 o'clock or so. Mumbai being about 3 hours or 2.5 hours behind us, it would have been around 7:30 in the evening then. So I did expect her to be back in her room because, she was feeling quite tired from having traveled that morning and everything. So I was hoping that I would be able to speak to her. It turns out that she then messaged me to say that, oh, her friends had dragged her out to basically eat at a restaurant in the hotel. So I said, yeah, okay, that's fine. We'll talk later. I'm up anyway. So it was probably about 11 or so that I then got a call from her. She says that she was, in fact, she said that she was in the restaurant and that they basically had heard some shots being fired, and sounded as if it was on the street or something like that. And at the same time, she said, "Oh, okay, they are asking us to move." So she said, "Okay, all right, please do, and call me back as soon as you can." Right. Probably shortly after that, maybe less than 20 minutes or so, she then called me again to say that she was actually in a stairwell, right, in the hotel. And she was there with a fairly large group of other guests, and that they were basically told to keep quiet, and they were basically, trying to hide at that point in time. So, we spoke briefly, and after that, I asked her to obviously put down the phone, and then again just try and call me back when she could and when she's out. So I didn't hear from her for the next few hours. I managed to contact one of her colleagues, which had been having dinner with her, and apparently in the rush to get out of the restaurant, somehow or other they had been separated. So he hadn't heard from her as well. So obviously, frantically trying to watch the news and bearing in mind, this was 2008. So there was a lot of coverage, but it was on, Indian news channels and everything else. So I was trying to go around the internet, trying to figure out what's going on. It was around probably 4:30 a.m. that she then called me back again. And it was at this time that she said that she had been captured, she had been held hostage, and that basically she was talking to hostages and they had some demands. So I told her I'll do what I can to try and get in touch with the Singapore government and everyone else, whoever, who might be able to help or whatever it is. And the demand then was that, basically the police pull away and leave. So frantically tried to contact anybody I could. Did manage to get through to some people, and I even managed to get through through an Indian colleague of mine to somebody, an Indian police person who was actually there based in Mumbai as well. And around 6 o'clock, or I think it probably would have been just around 6+ a.m. All this time when we spoke, we had been keeping calm to some extent, right? Because again, no point in my freaking out. And I guess she was trying to be strong as well. And we were basically trying to talk in fairly, measured tones, etc. At about this time around, I'm going to say 6 something in the morning, I managed to get a call again to her. And I told her that, I had managed to get through to the Singapore government. They were, they were trying to get in touch with their Indian counterparts, etc. And they were doing all they could. And it was then that I told her I loved her, and she said she loved me. And as it turned out, those are the very last words that we said to each other. We subsequently found I subsequently found out that she really had passed on just a few minutes probably after that very last call. A few years, maybe the following year, we actually got in touch with a couple, a Turkish couple, an elderly Turkish couple who were actually there, held hostage at the same time as she was. They were released because they were Muslim, but they were actually there when she was actually shot. So they told me, what had happened. Now I had then made a trip down to go to Mumbai. The foreign embassy, MOF was the MFA, sorry, were very, very, very quick about it, extremely helpful. They did everything they could to expedite the travel to Mumbai, make all the necessary arrangements, etc. Now, before I left, and obviously at that point in time, I didn't know then that she had passed on. I actually wrote a note to her. In my mind, it's still like, oh, maybe she was held hostage. They would like to have a different hostage instead. You can, exchange her, for me. So I wrote a note to her that basically said that, dear, when you come back and read this note, I'm not with you, then, you should know that, I want you to be happy. I want you to carry on your life. I want you to, live a life, as you would, and don't let me, my loss or whatever hold you back. I mean, silly words, obviously, but a note that I had written to her. So MFA very quickly arranged to travel to Mumbai, all this time obviously unaware that she had already passed on. And probably by the morning of the following day, right? So this was when she passed on, it was the morning of the 27th in Singapore. I would have arrived in the morning of the 28th in Mumbai, or early morning. So it's probably, 2, 3 a.m. at night or whatever. We actually drove to the site itself, but there was a lot of silence, nothing going on. And MFA guys basically said, look, I mean, we'll come back here in the morning because, there's no point just staying there also. Went back to the hotel, obviously didn't quite sleep, but we headed back out there early in the morning again, probably by about 6:30, 7:30, and we were held in a holding pen. So it was quite interesting. They put us in a holding area where just out of earshot of the hotel, and they put us, people who had relatives of guests, relatives of workers, of staff, in that area, basically, to wait on any news, right? So, and occasionally you would still hear gunshots. So you would hear, the crack of a rifle, you would hear a small, tiny explosion or whatever it is. So all this time I kind of thought, something was still going on, she was still being held hostage to some extent. But during the course of the morning, as the gunshots got more and more sporadic, I guess, you kind of thought, okay, I mean, it's sounds like the main, whether the main action was over or not, I don't know. But, obviously a lot of uncertainty as to what was going on. Now, during this time that I was seated there, obviously, I prayed fervently. I even sang hymns, right? I actually literally there. My aunt had accompanied me. My aunt was actually in the MFA, so she managed to get a visa very quickly. So she was there with me. And this is my Hindu aunt, right? My dad's side of the family. So I was there, praying fervently. I remember very clearly at some point I sang "As the Deer," the entire song, right? Literally just sang "As the Deer," and just prayed and prayed. At some point, soldiers said that somehow or other, I don't know how they managed to arrange it. They actually said, "Oh, why don't you come and try and see, if you can identify her." So I actually went into the hotel, right? Kind of ran in there, taking cover and everything else, before the area had actually been properly cleared. And the soldier actually brought me to a van, right, which was actually, stacked full of, the deceased actually. And I actually went in and tried and look around amongst all these bodies to see if I could see her. And at that point in time, she wasn't there. So I went back, and it still wasn't clear for us to actually go up. So at some point, they let us have a look at photographs of the deceased, and they gave us, photographs to look at, and finally I found one that that was her. Somehow or other, again, I can't remember how, but we did get permission to go up. So I actually walked up into the hotel to the 19th floor, and there was where I found her body, and and I said my goodbye. So next things were, obviously not say a blur, because obviously I felt and remembered every single moment, but the arrangements were made by my other relatives who had joined us, and together the MFA guys, who again did everything. They arranged for the body to be repatriated, etc. We stayed at the hotel maybe for, I can't remember whether it was the evening, but certainly by the next day we were on the plane back to Singapore. And everyone, was just, just very, very helpful about this whole thing. Now, we came back to Singapore. I think many of you might just remember there was a lot of, stuff that was going on in the media, etc. So the return to Singapore was, it was an overwhelming outpouring, literally an outpouring of support and grief. I mean, grief as well, actually, but support, a huge amount of support. All my friends, relatives, etc., all rallied around, her family, myself. Actually, well, obviously all of them were also, hurting as well, but, just a huge amount of support during the wake and funeral. People like, even Archbishop came down, and we arranged a funeral mass at St. Teresa's Church, and Father Aru, who was the priest who had buried my parents, agreed to basically host the mass. It was a very beautiful mass, and actually I remember that at the end of the mass, it rained and poured a little bit, like, well, heavier, like today, and it just felt as if the heavens itself were weeping. So that period, obviously, just very intense. Things were going on all around you. A lot of logistical arrangements to be made. You don't have very much time to think, right? And and obviously, I think it was really the aftermath that hit that when you start to really feel it. I was due to start work on the 1st. Obviously, I couldn't do that anymore. That got pushed back by a couple of weeks. Initially, really, was in a state of not being able to even summon the strength to get out of bed, lying on the floor, just, screaming and shouting, literally. Friends, my friends and together my siblings actually arranged a roster of people to just be with me throughout. And in fact, they carried on for a few months after that as well. And I think if they had not been there to do that, I just don't know what would have happened. But early on, my brother, spoke to me and said, because obviously at that point in time, I had no will to live, a very strong desire to go to her, basically not saying, but yeah, but yes, contemplating indeed death actually, right? Because he just wanted to go to wherever she was. And my brother said one thing to me that, and this is one thing which I guess, if anything, is something which to just remember, even if you cannot live, he told me, even if you cannot live for yourself, right, live for us, right? Live for your family, live for your friends who love you very much. And I think that, that was enough to some extent. I said, yeah, okay. Right? It was, it wasn't, if I can't do it for myself now and I couldn't, at least do it for my friends and do it for my family. So it kind of got me off the floor to some extent, right? After 2 weeks of really just not doing anything, I forced myself to go back to work, right? And I think this was probably a very helpful distraction at that point in time. Although my colleagues in the office had to put up with me, obviously, tearing up back then pretty frequently and gently even weeping in my corner. Fortunately, one of my close colleagues was a Catholic as well, and I remember not then, but she was giving me quite a bit of comfort, and she would speak to me. But a few months after that, she actually made handmade a rosary for me as well. And it was all through this, and everybody in the office, I would say, including my boss and all, were obviously pretty understanding. So even though they pretty much got a lame duck as an employee, they gave me the space and time that I needed. It was probably then that my faith, I suppose, started to flounder to some extent. Initially, it was, still continue to go to church, praying and everything else. But for some reason, I'll explain why. It tipped into disbelief, right? Basically, at some point it became, God isn't there, right? There is no God. It was, I can't get angry at God because there's nothing to get angry about. It can't be, right? It's not a case of I am angry at God, but rather, there's nothing there because, anybody who's a loving God would, not allow this to happen. So there isn't anything there. And it's a strange thing, right? Because faith, as we know, is obviously very personal. You can't intellectualize faith, right? It's something that we all feel. And I attempted to intellectualize it, right? I attempted to try and find a tangible in that. So even at the same time, while I didn't believe he was there, I tried to find tangible signs of God, if that makes sense at all. Now, what did that mean? I actually tried to look for this. For one thing, a friend who had gone through a very similar loss and tragic loss of his then girlfriend actually shared me this book. This is a imprimatur. It's written by Kevin Olin Johnson. It's called Apparitions and Mystic Phenomena and What They Mean. So I started to try to look at to find the tangible aspects of God, right? Because we do have obviously in the church apparitions and recognized apparitions, etc. So try to look into the mystical aspects of the Catholic Church to some extent. And hoping, desperately that I would find proof, right? Because the faith was undermined, and it would became a intellectual exercise in a way. I even looked at things like theological books like this one, right? It's Karen Armstrong, the Case for God, basically a more analytical book. So not so much about faith and theology, more to do with facts and logic and stuff like that, which I guess we all know doesn't really, it's not about what faith is about. But at that point in time, that's what I tried to find. And it was very strange that despite my disbelief and despite my, thinking that he wasn't there, there was, however, a tremendous longing for him to be there, right? Because, I desperately wanted him to be there so that I would know that Puhaindran was in a safe place, was in his arms. So it was a very strange, paradoxical time. And maybe something else that held me back as well. I mean, was perhaps in some way the catharsis of belief. Actually allowing myself to believe and allowing myself to, just believe, because all things are good and everything else was in a way something I felt like, perhaps subconsciously couldn't allow myself, because I also experienced a tremendous amount of survivor guilt, despite not being obviously there with her, and not survivor guilt in the true sense of the word, but survivor guilt of being as one of the surviving of a couple. It was just a sense of, why her, not me, right? And I felt, it was right to beat myself up, and I didn't want to. Perhaps there's an aspect of me that didn't want to allow myself to be healed through faith as well, So I again, perhaps something that also helped me back at that point in time as well. Just not allowing myself to want to be healed, right? Wanting to feel the pain, wanting to feel connected, right? The pain was something which, made me feel connected with her. But I guess all this time, again, never losing that love for God, and very strangely, never losing that love for the church. I mean, I know that doesn't make sense, because the church is God. I mean, God, the church is God on earth, right? But to some extent, right? Because I didn't, it's the other way around, right? People normally believe in God, lose faith in the institution, but for me, it was the other way. It was very, very strange. I had all these people, these good people that I knew and loved in the church, and I continue to love them and look to them, but despite my disbelief. So spent a lot of time with priests. I remember one day I was just so disturbed in church. I literally just walked. My office then was at Plaza by the Park. I walked over to the cathedral and spoke to Father Eugene Vaz, who was actually somebody I had known from working in the past and everything else, catechism and everything else. And just during lunchtime, remember collapsing and sobbing in his arms, and he was just trying to comfort me, to tell me that God is there, he is there, my child, right? And in big moving voice of Father Eugene Vaz, you can imagine him doing that. And so many Catholics reached out to me as well. Another priest whom who reached out to me then. He up to now he says he doesn't know why, and we've been firm friends since, was Father Luke Fong, and he shared with me this series of talks and spirituality series, actually also on CD, but now it's been, I think there have been books as well. It was by Richard Rohr and Paula Diassi. It's called the a spirituality for the two halves of life, and it was written by Richard Rohr. I think many of you would know him as an author. Obviously, he's written a lot of books. But Paula Diassi was basically a lady who had lost her husband and her daughter, and basically then went on and embarked on, I guess, a spiritual journey as well. And it was this series that he had shared with me as well. I guess we'll send links, or if you're interested, just to see that later, what some of these books were. At the same time, many other people had it was quite amazing actually. I literally got books sent to me just in the mail and things like that. You know, I mean, 2 books which I guess again many of you all may be familiar with. But you know, I read the Shack, right? Mitch Albom is you know, this book as well. Interestingly, however, I think one of the books that actually spoke to me the most was not a very spiritual book, but it was actually A Grief Observed, because if you read this book, it's literally just only about, you know, a few pages. It's a very thin book, but it's literally C.S. Lewis ranting and raving about his pain, and you know, going on and saying how you know, just talking about how he screamed into the night, how he just, you know, he just sat there, you know, and just questioned God and questioned everything. And it just, you know, it just spoke to me, because that was exactly what, you know, I was going through, you know, just sitting around in the night, you know, staring at the photos that, you know, somebody had given me not for this reason, but, you know, we had a one of those photo frames, electronic photo frames, and slideshows will go by, and I just put a picture there and literally just sit there in the darkness and stare at it. You know, every now and then I'll be screaming and everything else and stuff like that. It was just a difficult time. That was interestingly, you know, however, reading the book actually said, okay, maybe you're not that cuckoo after all. And people, you know, people who go through that kind of pain and episodes in their lives. Now, somehow or other, you know, I plodded on, right? I think, you know, just went through the day, the motions of the day, just you know, just literally going through the motions of each day, right? We're really without purpose. Well, and I should maybe again in the context of people who had helped me, you know, and tried to speak to me. Another person I spoke to. So at some point, I know, given the depth of my grief, I suppose my brother had arranged with me to speak to a psychiatrist, quite a senior psychiatrist at IMH. And coincidentally, he was Catholic as well. So, you know, we always spend a bit of time together, quite a lot of time, you know, he's trying to talk through it, talk through grief and everything else. But the one thing that, you know, I think he really struck me about was, as I said, I was going on this journey for you know, trying to find God through mysticism and everything else. And it was, at some point, he shared with me a personal experience that he had about how, you know, he encountered something which he couldn't explain as well. And strangely enough, you know, at that point in time, it was one of those things that really spoke to me. Yeah. Now, I guess so all this time, you know, again, just never, always trying to search, always trying to find God, but, you know, perhaps, I guess, still not finding the answers at that point in time, right? But at the same time, loving the people who were trying to help me, loving the people who were there for me, and, you know, trying my best, you know, for their sakes as well, you know, to really make the effort to find God. The work at some point, I think, you know, at some point I kind of got to a level of, you know, some degree of effectiveness, not a huge amount, right? I think I would have fired myself if I were the boss, but you know, at least I think I got through the days, and I think I was reasonably productive at some point, but really a very much empty existence. And this was where, I mean, the office really helped to some extent. They actually allowed me to take a sabbatical after about 2.5 years or so. About 2 years, I guess. Yes. This was a sabbatical where I joined a convent, a Canosian convent in Timor-Leste, and basically tried to, you know, hoping that to teach children, and, you know, hoping that this will basically be a something that will help to lift me spiritually as well. So again, part of, you know, never giving up and always trying to search for God in a way. I guess in a way, and I know if I were to go through that whole story, it'd be it'd be a bit too long. But I guess I went through that. It was an interesting experience. But I guess I came out of it not feeling as, you know, spiritually, you know, as I fortified as I had hoped, right? Because I guess in its own way, anybody who's worked in third world countries will know that these are very challenging places to work in sometimes, and they got their own challenges, etc. So they kind of got caught up in the whole, issues around that. Although, obviously waking up every morning, attending mass at 6:30 in the morning, doing vespers with the nuns and everything else was actually something which was really good. And to this day, I got really good friends there. But I did feel when I came back, still to some extent a little bit empty. Well, still quite empty. Now, and then for that reason, I think I felt as if it was perhaps the lowest ebb of my of what I was going through. Not because it was the most painful period. I think the most painful period was before, but because I had the sense of hopelessness. I felt the sense of the fact that this will never pass, and that I will always be in this state of, loss, of grief, of just purposelessness, etc. And it was very strange and almost I would say an overnight occurrence. Now I had met my wife Catherine, probably on a dive trip actually in 2009. So a year after we had that all this had happened, I had gone by myself on a dive trip, and I had met her and a group of friends who again coincidentally happened to be largely Catholic. She herself is not, but the friends who were, right? And we maintained contact, right? So we had spoken all this time. We had gone for dinners, etc. But obviously I was not in any emotional state, or anything like that. And while I was in Timor, she was actually one of those people who would regularly Skype me and would talk, and she would basically encourage me, etc. So strangely enough, when it was at this lowest ebb in my life, when I came back from this sabbatical, and I hoped so much that this would help to heal me and put me in a place where I could recover. For some reason, and up to now I don't know why. I mean, just felt okay. I mean, let's just let's try going out with Catherine and let's see what happens from there. And all of a sudden, just opening up, allowing my heart to be opened up that little crack, allowed a release of emotion to some extent, and it allowed me to allow somebody else back in my life, and all of a sudden I felt, again, some degree of purpose. And that grew as the months went on, right? And eventually, when we got married, obviously I was in a tremendously happy state. Now, but I think what happened though was perhaps some sort of epiphany and some sort of realization, and that at some point when I started to open my heart up to Catherine, and I started to allow myself to feel again, to breathe again, I remembered the note that I had written to Huiyan before I had gone to Mumbai. And I remembered, if you can recall the words I said, live your life, I don't want you to be, bogged down, all those things I written to her and said. And I realized that those were the words that she would have said to me. That your loved one would want you to live your life, right? They wouldn't want you to grieve for them, to live in a state of uselessness, of purposelessness, of loss. But no, if they loved you as much as you do love them, and they do, right? What would they want for you? And I realized that, those words were actually her words to me, right? To live your life, I mean, I said forget me, but I guess, I wouldn't do that, but, but live life, right? To basically, don't worry, right? I mean, I moved on, right, to a different place. I want you to be happy, right? And I realized that, that was her speaking to me. That was my loved one. Her most fervent wish would have been for me to live my life. And it was then that, I realized that, that's what I had to do. Subsequently, we got married. I mean, Kat and I still had a lot of pain in me, obviously, right? Even up to then, to some extent. But I would say that, the thing that really allowed me to feel unmitigated joy again was the birth of my second child. Of my first child, sorry. Liesl. Errol, the second picture, please. Yeah. So when Liesl came along, right, I think that was a time when, again, I could feel joy from the bottom of my heart. Right? Up to then, strangely, I know I got married and all, but, it was, it's still a lot of pain and to some extent, right? But really, when Liesl came along, that's when I, felt, just so much able to live again. So pure joy again, pure hope, pure purpose, and that was really how, in a way, the life had come, had happened. Now, as an interesting aside, we actually got married. It was Father Aru and Saint Teresa's as well when we actually got married again. When I actually married Catherine. Now, so when Liesl came along, in a way, that was what allowed me to really truly live again. And Errol, we just showed the last picture. Yeah. This is us now, right? This is my family of 2 girls. That little baby that you saw is now the girl, 8-year-old on your right, and Carmen, who came along 4 years later, is 4 this year. Liesl's 8, and and right now, it's hard to imagine. If I look back at that state of hopelessness and lack of purposelessness, if I allowed myself to slip away, I would never have experienced the joy of this family I have now. The joy of life which I have now as well. Now, coming back a little bit now to God, that journey, has been gradual. It was certainly when Catherine came along, I started to think again. It's not a case of where, as I said, because it was so forceful in a way that my faith was shaken. It was strangely enough, the faith journey has taken a lot longer. The healing of, that faith has taken a lot longer. And that's why I said, to some extent, my journey isn't complete, right? And I don't know, maybe you can tell me, right? Because in trying to give this talk and talk about it, maybe it is God trying to tell me that, look, child, this is what I am. I'm there for you. If you can speak to people like this, then God is there. But that has been a lot more gradual, right? We started to go to church again. Started to attend mass. Now, obviously, the kids are going to catechism and everything else. And bit by bit, brick by brick, literally, that faith has been slowly built up again. Am I the same Catholic that I was before all this happened? Obviously not, right? Not even. I tell myself. I told Beng Seng before I started, I'm maybe about 60%, just over the cusp of, believing in God to some extent. But maybe I don't know, and again, maybe you guys can tell me, right? Perhaps we won't be the same Catholics that we were before, right? Because of what we've gone through. But if we continue to search, if we continue to hope and want Him, which is what I feel fervently more than anything else, and then maybe that is enough, right? Because and brick by brick, you will rebuild, the faith that you once had. Now, in ending, right, I do want to share, however, 2 things, right, that perhaps, it's been I know, rather weighty session, but I do want to share 2 things that, going very far back to the time when it happened, and I look back up to now, which I can't explain, and perhaps, again, you tell me, what you think, right? and this was during the wake itself, right? So it's quite funny. This Chinese have a belief, and I'm technically not even Chinese, but Yen's family was that you need to be at home on a particular night during the wake in order that if the spirit comes back, you need to be at home or something like that. So I said, I had been sleeping literally at the wake in the tent all that time actually. So somebody had bought me a safari bed and I was literally sleeping beside the coffin. So, but that night, I went back home to sleep in my bed. Now, it was very funny. It's in a really, really deep sleep, very tired. And then, I used to sleep with my hand kind of like covering my forehead like that. Right? And then I felt a tickle. Literally, it's like almost like somebody like stabbing you in the armpit trying to tickle you kind of thing. It's like okay, I'm just dreaming or whatever it is. I was like, and I was like, it's really, really persistent and really annoying. I was like, what the hell is this, right? So I woke up briefly, right? And I woke up very briefly. I was like, okay, must have been a dream or whatever. But it's like, just felt so real. And normally you so fell back asleep. Next morning I woke up, I was like, what happened? I literally remember feeling that, and normally you forget your dreams, right? So, dreams normally you don't remember. This was something which I literally felt, okay, somebody really tried very hard to tickle me. And to me, I was like, okay, if Hui Yan were ever to try to give me a message, right? And, somehow or other, if she had, tickling, trying to get me to laugh, it might be a way to do it, right? And up to now, to this very day, I cannot explain that sensation that I experienced that very, that night. And another occurrence was, probably in the first year of her loss, of my losing her. I was in the columbarium in St. Mary of the Angels, and I spent a lot of time there, obviously. And again, just my usual moping and depressed and crying and weeping and everything else, and not doing anything different from what I would normally do. Suddenly, an intense feeling of, warmth, of, just something filling you up so much that, I couldn't explain. I just completely unbidden. It was just a normal period where I was just crying, not praying very hard or whatever it is. And just an intense feeling of, something filling me up so much. And again, I made so many visits to the columbarium. I just remember that time so distinctly. Now, I for some reason, I never allowed those things, maybe for the same reason I kind of explained, it was the catharsis of belief that I didn't want to allow myself the guilt. I didn't want to allow myself to be comforted by those. But I would say those two things would be something that, up to today, I cannot explain. And it's just something I want to share with you guys as well, right? Yeah, maybe it was the Lord trying to send a message and, allowing it to be felt in a tangible way, which was, at that point was something I needed, but I just didn't allow myself to feel it even when I felt it. But anyway, so in summary, right, I think, just a few things to take note of. I guess, if we do experience, grief to some extent, initially it'll be very, very hard, right? You won't, it's not about finding purpose for yourself. It's not about finding, because I think that purpose for everyone will come in their own time, in their own place. Whenever it happens, it happens. Everybody's grief journey is different. But if you can't find purpose, find that purpose for your love for others, right? That you need to live for those people around you who love you. And you need to pick yourself up for those people who would be, who are there caring for you. And the second thing is, when the time comes and you're able to ask yourself and you're able to reason, ask yourself, what would your loved one have wanted for you, right? They would not want you to be in that state of depression, of grief, of constant sorrow. They would want you to live your life, right? They would want you to get off that floor, right? Yes, remember them in your heart, sure, but go and live your life, right? Experience life, have a family, have kids, and do whatever you were not able to do with them, right? So thank you, everyone. I think I hope I think this is the end of the sharing. Hopefully, some of it, it's a little bit longer than I think expected, and I hope I haven't put you guys to sleep. But hopefully, some of that may have resonated with you. So, Errol, I think over to you, and Bing Seng, over to you.
Thanks, Mike, for that very deep and personal sharing. I'm sure recounting the last 12 years cannot be easy. You describe yourself as being 60% way there, but I think you might be seeking God harder than most of us, and I think that's a wonderful and great thing. Charles' question is about how your feelings toward the terrorists who killed Hu Yan. How do you feel towards them today?
I think today, I suppose the feelings are a little bit different from what they were then, obviously. I think back then, I mean, I don't think I ever had a feeling of, it's very strange, right? I mean, I don't think I ever had a feeling, I don't know if it was hatred. I don't know if it was hatred. I don't think it was, right? I don't think, because, okay, one of the stories which when I met the Turkish couple in Istanbul, right? And they told me, so they were with Hui Yan, at that entire time, they were held hostage together. So they spoke to the terrorists, right? And then they spoke about how one of them, there were only two of them. One of them was, I guess, a seasoned militant. The other one was a much younger person. And he said that, they said about how this boy, and I use the word boy, right, was literally amazed at water that came out of taps, and and just marveled at these things that are around him in a hotel, and I can't help but feel, they, in many ways, they are probably people which have been misled as well. Certainly this boy was. I can't say the same for his partner, who was, probably a much more seasoned killer. But a lot of them just have had circumstances which, were different, and somehow or other they felt the only way that they could meaningfully do this, either because you're brainwashed or whatever it is, was by doing this heinous act, right? So I think I've learned to perhaps definitely not hatred anymore, and maybe I even, to some extent, I wouldn't say understand, but do realize that perhaps people come into these positions or this way of being for circumstances that we may not even understand. Don't justify them, but it's they're almost like reasons to some extent. I don't know if that answers. So the question: do I feel? Certainly in my early days, though, I remember thinking that if I ever had, if somebody were to just give me a rifle and send me off and point me in a direction or whatever it is, I certainly want to hunt them down and everything else. But I guess because it was such an impossible situation anyway, I think that sense of wanting to, vengeance or whatever was something which I wasn't a Superman, wasn't a superhero, whatever it is. So it's something that's quite impossible. So it wasn't something which I carried with me for a very long time. Yeah. Sorry, don't know if that answered the question. Yeah.
No, I think you certainly did. Let me move on to Trillian's question, who is asking about your question, which relates to the workplace. She's asking whether or not you encountered a change in your experience at work when your faith was reignited.
Yeah, I guess as part of the healing journey, right? I mean, you know, so as I said, one of my very good friends, dear friends, uh, was Catholic, and in fact, quite a few of my now team members and everything else are also Catholic. So I think as my faith began to grow, I mean, I get restored, I suppose. You know, I actually did, you know, consciously seek out other colleagues who were Catholics Standard Chartered. We actually would go for mass together, you know, well, typically feast day masses, to be fair, right? I mean, you know, but we would make the effort to go down to the masses, the feast day masses together, yeah, I mean, I don't know that that's really rekindled the, you know, spiritual life in the office as such, but certainly I did make the effort and continue to do so to reach out to fellow Catholics in the office. You know, we would definitely, attend masses together, make the effort to call each other. We would talk about, you know, doing. If you're Catholic, you know, we met. We'll talk about we'll talk about what we would have done over Christmas, or talk about church and everything else. So I think there was a much greater willingness to reach out to other Catholics. Having said that, I don't know, again, because as I said, I know that paradox of being, you know, loving the people in the church anyway. I don't think I ever lost it, but perhaps there was probably a greater willingness as obviously as I suppose might say the faith has started to get patched back again. Yeah.
Let me ask you a related question, which is what Stan Chart, which was your employer at that point, what did they do, and in what way did they help you in that period of grief? You know, as I'm asking that more from the standpoint of as an employer, you know, how were they a good and supportive employer at that time? After all, we are CBN, you know, and we are talking about.
Yep. So, I couldn't overstate the degree of support that I received from my employer and my bosses and my seniors, right? I mean, I think that it is important for you to understand what your colleagues and all are going through. There will certainly be a period of time when, you know, they will not be themselves, right? And so it's interesting, right? This fellow Catholic that as I said, when it was quite interesting. So she was there for me for when I was going through it, and then she lost her father, right? At some point, and to some extent, you know, I guess I would like to think that I was there for her as well. So it is important to understand that these colleagues whom you work with will are going through a period, and as I said, everybody deals with it differently, right? Some people can bounce back very fast because maybe sometimes if you're dealing with long-term illness, it's not, sudden deaths are a little bit different because you don't get a chance to say goodbye. Long illnesses are different as well, but some people say that the morning starts when you have the diagnosis to some extent. So each people will deal with it in their own way, but I think everybody just has to realize that obviously grief is something which is will transform whatever person is going through. Certainly for the initial weeks and everything else, I would expect that, I hope that I would try and give them as much time as they can, as they need, right, to get back to normal. I tend to tell, and I've gone through, I guess, colleagues who have not said, my first instinct will be to tell them that, look, take all the time you need, right? Just hang in there, don't try and work yourself to death, but obviously also work helps at the same time. Getting me off the floor and into the office was actually a routine that ironically probably helped a little bit. That it actually is, well, first of all, it got me off the floor, right? The second thing is it got me moving around and just looking around. That helps as well. So give them space, etc. When for Standard Chartered, as I said, they actually gave me 6 months sabbatical. Very shortly into my career with them, which was obviously really unexpected. And they actually, my boss wanted to try and give me the best shot at healing as he could. So even though he knew 2 years in, I was, it was a long time, he was actually prepared to give me that time to try to find myself still. So, I think as a colleague, as a boss, I think, just try and give your team members, time and space, I guess.
Jerry, who I believe is your colleague from StanChart, is asking how you manage work after you got back from the sabbatical.
How did I manage work after I got back? Well, I guess it was more question before as well, right? I mean, I think after I got back, yes, lowest ebb, but I think it was still a bit of going through the motions. I think it was more, but it was kind of the same that had been the case for unfortunately the past 2 years, and hopefully, Jerry, I don't know whether whether when we were working together, you remember whether I was making sense or not. But hopefully, I did. But at some point, I think I probably achieved a relatively decent level of efficiency. But there's no question about it that it was really only after I had found the purpose with Catherine, and realizing I wanted to try to build a family again, that I really felt that, that real motivation to work, right? I mean, now, of course, we got different hang-ups in terms of work and everything else, but, then I actually felt a real motivation. I could throw myself into the work. I could work the long hours because I felt that I'm working now for a reason. I'm trying to earn money to support a family, and that was what really drove me. So it definitely made a difference in terms of when I finally did find my purpose, being able to work again. And anyway, hi Jerry.
So turning to the family now, both Charles and Adeline are asking about how you explain what happened to your children who have never met Hui Yan. Could you share that?
And I have actually. So so for the longest time we would say a prayer. So when we prayed as their night prayers, I would say a prayer, that pray for Hui Yan. And then when they were old enough, I would, certainly the older one now understands quite a lot of what's happened. I explained to her that Hui Yan was my first wife, and that she was actually killed by bad people and everything else. And at an early stage, actually, I'll bring her for the memorial. So we used to organize memorials for Hui Yan. In fact, for the first 3 years, we actually had quite, I won't say formal, but quite a big thing in terms of actually having a mini prayer service and everything else. Father Luke did one, Father JP helped me with one, Father Aro did one as well. And we would gather, etc. We continued to just gather as a family after those 3 years. So each time I would bring obviously her along, and each time as she grew older, and as she was able to absorb more information, I would actually tell her about what happened. Not going to the details, right? I mean, basically just telling her that Auntie Hui Yan was killed by bad men. I still have two pictures of Hui Yan in an area in the house where, so they know who she is. You've seen a picture of her, and I do talk to her, and every night we actually say a prayer as well. So we still continue. We will pray with her for my little kid. So even though the 4-year-old doesn't quite comprehend what's going on, she at least knows that we are praying for Auntie Hui Yan.
Okay, I think that brings us to the end of the questions we have. Thank you so much again, Michael, for sharing your experience you went through and your faith journey back. I think when I asked you whether or not you would share at this particular series, you had said that you thought you would because the sharing might benefit some others who are grieving as well. And I'm sure that, and thank you so much for agreeing to also let an edited version of the video be posted online. But I'm sure that that people who are experiencing something similar will definitely benefit from hearing your journey in dealing with your loss. So thank you once again, Michael, and let me hand over to Errol for some closing messages.
And last but not the least, as you know, we are not funded. We depend on donations and raise our own funds to support these programs that we conduct and activities. So do support us with your love offerings. You can do it by bank transfer or by PayNow using our UEN or the QR code here. You can also send checks to our address. If you have any feedback on this event, do email us at admin@cbn.sg, and have a great rest of your Saturday. And once again, thank you to Michael and Beng Seng for the Q&A, and Michael for his wonderful, honest, and moving sharing. And now I hand it over to Beng Seng for the closing prayer.
In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Dear God, thank you for the gift of Mike's sharing. Please bless Mike as he continues to seek you and in his journey on towards your kingdom. Please bless us all who are also in one way or another grieving or in need of healing. Help us be steadfast in our faith, especially in these difficult times. We thank you for all the times you have given us comfort and consolation. We know that you will never forsake us and will always be walking with us by our side, guiding us, lending us your strength. Amen. Okay, thank you everyone once again for joining us this morning. Have a blessed and joyous New Year. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. This is Beng Seng, Errol, and Mike signing off. Okay, bye-bye.